Hi, folks, it's Steve. I'm here with Paul Mladjenovic. Thank you, Paul, for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on this series with so many other notables. Thank you.
You are more than welcome. Let's start this way, Paul. As you know, I'm calling these interviews with freedom fighters, and I'm calling you a freedom fighter. And I'd like to know, do you consider yourself a freedom fighter?
Yes, I'm a peaceful guy, but in the sense of being uh, out there fighting bad ideas and anti-freedom ideas, and trying to fight for, you know, uh, knowledge, information about the benefits of freedom, both social and economic. So in that respect, yes, and I hope to step up my efforts through venues such as yours and so many other ones as the years unfold.
Has freedom always been important to you, or is this kind of new for you?
Well, for me, I came to America in 1963 as a 4-year-old. Me, my family were escapees from communism, and communism was about tyranny and poverty. And for me, it was a life-changing event. I saw what my family went through, even in my tender age, and I recall my older brother, who passed away right before the COVID stuff. He was telling me about how when my mother was speaking out in the marketplace and complaining about the lack of food, that the communist authorities, imprisoned her. And my brother told me, because I was young at the time, of course, they put us like in a basically like a like a nursery of some kind that's run by bureaucrats. And after a few days, she was released, and in front of they said to her, "If you do this again, you'll be put to death." You know, and so for me, I started off as I got to become in my teenage years, etc. Being an anti-communist was, of course, a formative thing, and it was in those roots that helped, make me in terms of my attitudes and thinking about freedom. It was extremely formative to me, and they said that when we came to America, I was very sick. Had we stayed in Yugoslavia, I could have died. So even though the quote unquote healthcare was free over there, it was free as long as you got it, but you didn't get much of it as a regular citizen. So fortunately, doctors in America, were able to attend to me, and here I am. So all of that, it propelled me to almost, every day ever since I try to learn about why is it bad, etc. And became the biggest lesson of my life about freedom versus force. That helped me understand almost every financial crisis in the last 100 years, and then some. You know, and people forget that force. Even in the name of what sounds like good initiatives, will have negative impacts. And so you saw that in the Great Depression and so much more. So the bottom line is those early years as an escapee from communism, that, and I thought of that as a very negative experience. But then as I got into my adult years doing what I do, as I've been a certified financial planner for 36 years. I've been, August will be my 40-year anniversary of being an educator, with my stuff. I mean, I now look back, and that experience was a good thing because it helped me understand more about how the world works, how freedom, and tyranny work, how that can, formulate your approach so you can be able to preserve your wealth, or preserve your freedom. So it was extremely formative. So the negative events from back then, now I look at them as it was a good thing because it was educational in ways that no other experience could have been.
That's remarkable. So you've actually been able to transform really negative and traumatic experiences growing up into positive energy to carry you forward. Um,
Exactly.
how did you do this? Did you have mentors to do this? Was it your own resources? How is it, what gave you the power to transform negative into positive like that?
Well, coming to America, um, obviously, even today, obviously, as a measure of freedom, it's always greater than a communist or a fascist state. And there was the Twin Brothers, by the way. But uh, the thing is, when I came to America and we escaped, obviously there was grinding poverty in Yugoslavia. You know what I mean? And people did whatever they could just to survive. And you come to a place like America where, my goodness, the poorest people in America were richer than the average person in my former communist country, Yugoslavia, again, which is no longer there. Um, and so I'm going, well, why is it? So, the more I saw this dichotomy, between freedom and poverty, and I mean, between poverty and prosperity, and between freedom and tyranny, that fueled me, to do that. And so I started learning about investing in my teenage years, like with small amounts, like how do I go, all these people are so affluent, certainly on a relative basis, it was far more than for us. I mean, when we came to America and we were in the 60s, we were in Hoboken, New Jersey, and we started off in a cramped apartment, roach and mouse infested, with a half a bath, and it was like $35 a month. But we were still better off than where we were. It was a blessing, and a lot of our friends, came from Yugoslavia, and they moved into Hoboken, as well. So it was a nice little, community of Yugoslavians that went through the 60s, and we were all grateful in that regard. But all of that, I mean, they kept on propelling me. I mean, like, so how do you get? I mean, there's so many wealthy people here, and I saw almost no wealthy people in Yugoslavia, not among the common citizenry, anyway. Of course, the elite, communist elite, just like the elite in many places, obviously, we're doing just great, doing just great. But I'm like, but what's stopping, the common citizenry? And the thing is, there's two things about wealth building, I mean, or building prosperity. A, your own pursuits, and what kind of environment you're in. If you can, produce your own prosperity, and you're in an environment, where that caters to that, like a free market, and you have civil rights, et cetera, and so forth. America had all of these things, so it was it taught me so much about how it works under the surface, and it was an ongoing thing. And the more I researched, the more I saw other countries, what it was globally, the history of it, the lessons, just kept on being more and more reinforced, about how freedom isn't just a social good, it's an economic good. So if you want people to flourish or have the opportunity to do better than ever before, you have to unleash them and give them the power and the path. Just like when you're in the Constitution and in the Declaration, you want to give them. You can't make people happy. You just have to make sure they have the pursuit towards happiness, and that is a very powerful thing. And it's an ongoing lesson, not only from my personal lifetime, but when you saw the panorama of history, it was the struggle between freedom and prosperity, on and on. So, anyways, but yeah, so very formative stuff, and it got me to where I am today. And I'm grateful for that.
You make a key point. The environment in which you're operating has an awful lot to do as to whether or not you succeed. Tell me about some of your early successes. So you started out as a teen and you learned about investing. When did you reach what you consider to be a milestone, or a plateau that says, yeah, I'm on the right track?
Well, the interesting thing is as I learned about money and finances and economics, and for me, I wanted to start building wealth. But again, we were poor at that time, so I go, well, geez, I don't have $1 million to invest. I have very little. So I started to learn, how do you start investing with small amounts of money? All righty, and I learned it through my teenage years, and I learned about savings bonds, and I learned about dividend reinvestment plans with stocks, where you can start off with as little as 25 or 50 bucks. You know what I mean? So this is where I started with my pursuits. And as I learned how to do it, it became the raw material for the first course that I ever taught, which was August of 1983. Again, in 2 months, it'll be my 40-year anniversary. And it was called the Small Investor Seminar. And I wasn't kidding. I mean, like, how do you start investing with small amounts? Because I didn't see any other course out there. So I go, why can't I have my own? You know what I mean? So I started doing that, and that started off, I did it independently, at first. But then later that fall, they were adult education companies. Like there was the Discovery Center and the Learning Annex in New York City. I don't think they're around anymore, but they were very active during the 80s and 90s and beyond. And so that became a course. And then I go, wow, geez, I would love to see if there's a profession where, my love of money and my love of dealing with people, because I enjoyed education. I mean, the love of money, in terms of learning about it, et cetera, and dealing with people. I said, I wonder if there's a profession out there for me. And then, as I was, going forward, right around early 1984, I heard about a brand new, and at the time was an obscure um, um, certification, like a license, basically, which was the Certified Financial Planner. And that started off in as a mail order course, believe it or not, in Denver, Colorado. All right. And I wasn't crazy about mail order as a. I think there was anything wrong with it, but I just think it wasn't for me. I needed to have interaction with an instructor. So the school in Denver started to have, pilot programs to do it in a live classroom setting. So I found out that Adelphi University, which had a Manhattan campus at the time, was doing this course to be a CFP. And it was, I think, 4 modules. It was like insurance, investing, taxation, and I forgot the other one, like insurance and risk management, et cetera. So I took the course and I became a certified financial planner in June of 1985. And up until 2021, I did it for 36 years. And I think I did it longer than anybody else that I know of, because in that regard. So that became a milestone for me. And so I'm grateful for that. And then my courses went from teaching about the small investor seminar, but many people who took the course, or wanted to take the course, they used to joke with me and says, "Oh, because then the title of the course went from the small investor seminar to the $50 wealth builder," and that stuck ever since. So I remember in the 80s, people telling me, "Oh, Paul, I don't even have $50 to invest. I couldn't take your course. I don't even have $50. Ha ha ha." So I said, "But well, if you don't have $50, look, I was in Yugoslavia. No one had $50, but you live in a system where in a weekend you can launch a part-time business from home." All right. And because I was doing this activity as a CFP from home and part-time at the time while I was working elsewhere, like in the banking industry, et cetera, I said, well, if I can launch a part-time home business, why don't you? So that became my second course, which was, how to start a part-time home business. And that became the new title, Home Business Gold Mine, and so in this, I used to tell everybody, that, in these courses, this proliferated, and I do at least, 12 to 15 courses now on various pursuits, both investing topics like options and stocks and ETFs. And another one was starting a home business, like consulting, et cetera, and so forth. So I got to do a lot of courses, and then I started traveling across the country because there were schools that have me out. And I would fly out there and I would do 2 courses on a Friday, 2 on a Saturday, 2 on a Sunday, and take the red eye home Sunday night, so that I can get to work on Monday, so I got to the point by the early 1990s that I was doing over 150 seminars annually across the country, ranging from California to Toronto, to Florida, Texas, Boston, and I enjoyed those live programs. Was very invigorating. I loved it. And during that time, obviously, to stay on top of my game, I did a lot of research, and so one thing led to another. But in everything that I did, there was always the undercurrent of how free markets, and free market principles underlie, people's efforts to go from wherever they're at, whether it's grinding poverty or not, to the next level with their own pursuits. Because again, God gave you everything you needed, at birth, your abilities, your mind, your ability to discern, to choose, to focus, to work, to choose things that you have a passion for. And that stuff should be unleashed. But you couldn't unleash it in a society that had no freedom. Obviously, like try to launch a business in a place like North Korea. You know what I mean? What happens then? You know, and then a lot of these lessons just kept on I learning over and over again. Like, for example, part of the reason why Yugoslavia collapsed, right? It's no longer around, you know. So, and it finally entered the dustbin of history in 1994. You know what I mean? And it's like the communist country then, you know, was tearing apart at the seams during 1992, 1993. You know, it entered hyperinflation because as the communists tried to fix their economy, what did they do? Just print up lots of money. But that didn't solve anything. It just caused a hyperinflationary collapse. Right. And in 93, I got married. And me and the missus, my bride, we were going to honeymoon in Yugoslavia, you know, but at the time, civil war, hyperinflationary collapse, et cetera. That ruins a good honeymoon, those kind of things, you know. So we instead went to the Caribbean, you know what I mean? And so all this time we were planning to go back there during it, but then the pandemic hit and then you couldn't travel, et cetera. So we're looking forward to visiting my mother country after being away for so long, since 1963. But in any case, all those pursuits, when I thought about investing and starting a business, you know, I try to make sure that I always entered in some free market principles because people need to understand this stuff. And I think that I'll have to up my game when I work with great freedom fighters like you, Stephen, because the world needs this kind of knowledge and principles now more than ever, my friend, now more than ever.
Are we doing God's work? I mean, you're mentioning that we have God-given gifts. We're mentioning that we need a social and political environment to be able to bring forth those gifts. So in your eyes, are we doing what God wants us to do, or does God care whether or not we use it?
Well, you know what? God gave us a free will, you know, and freedom as a gift. And you know, he's a lot wiser than all of us combined. So there's a reason behind it because he wants us to be happy and fulfilled and satisfied. You know, he gave us a planet with tremendous resources, and when he gives you a mind and the abilities, you know, it wasn't just to, you know, sit there and put it in a hole in the ground and see what happens. I mean, it was a purposeful thing, just like when people got off the ark. What do you say? Go forth and prosper. You know what I mean? And the interesting thing is that if you did I know some people who did an analysis of the Bible from an economic perspective, and you find that throughout it has a very strong free market theme to it. You know, as a matter of fact, if you look at the Ten Commandments, you know, beside the social part, the part that touches on economics, you know, very free market. I mean, thou shalt not steal. You know, in other words, what do we talk about when we talk about free markets? You know, and free market capitalism, mutual voluntary exchange. I boil it down to those three words: mutual voluntary exchange. Where socialism is about coercion, control, and confiscation. Those are the three words over there. So when I use those three words, people start to go, "Oh, really interesting." You know, so you start, planting the curiosity in people's minds. You know, so when you looked at the Bible and when you look at like the Ten Commandments, you see extraordinary evidence about freedom. You know, as far as God's concerned, because then obviously that helps us propel to where our dreams and passions are, and the idea, and I think and the idea that look, live and let live. I'll get what I want as long as I help you get what you want. A lot of these things are free market principles, and and when you tested it out, you'll end up finding out it's really quite interesting. I've really been looking forward to for the last dozen plus years to be a debater on college campuses, where I'd love to see a college audience, again, hopefully there for knowledge and curiosity, where I can butt heads with socialist and communist professors about this stuff so people understand this. And in a dozen years, I haven't had a single taker, of this, and because you start to learn about what works and what doesn't work. I mean, it's no coincidence that free market capitalism has had the greatest success of any economic system in modern and ancient history. It reduces more poverty than any other system. Meanwhile, other systems where it's 100% run by government bureaucracy, it doesn't encourage innovation, growth, passions and, launching enterprises. It stifles or punishes them, or worse. So you're going to have people living in grinding poverty and not living to what I think is really a mandate from God. It all comes back to, for me, it does have a lot of biblical roots and everything I'm talking about. So that only adds confidence to, that I think I'm on the right path, and there's fellow travelers on the road like yourself and so many others. So there's still hope when you have folks like that out there, you know?
Indeed, it does. So how do you deal with the disappointment and maybe even frustration that, like in your case with the colleges, they're not receptive to this open debate and may the best idea win? Does that get you down? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Well, you know what? It's interesting that God won't measure me by how successful I am. He's going to measure me by, did you make an attempt? Did you try to make a difference? Because all of us are going to look him in the eye. Probably momentarily after our physical life ends, and say, well, what'd you do? Did you sit there and do nothing? I mean, or did you try to make an attempt? And we all do things differently. I mean, I'm no more courageous than a lot of other folks, and less courageous than others. But that doesn't mean in your own individual pursuits you couldn't make progress in terms of enlightening people about the things that you learn. I think all of us who've gone through the school of hard knocks and through decades of this, I think we do have a moral obligation, not only to our own children, but in many others, to share with this so that they can enjoy the fruits of their labor, much as we have had the opportunity. So, um, what I've learned really is that, sometimes even in the depths of what you mentioned, like this difficulty, and a lot of these kids are getting, I don't know, for lack of better terms, either misinformed or brainwashed or whatever. Some colleges are worse than others, but at least I do see, a lot of hope out there. Like when they say the darkness of the universe can't extinguish the brightness from a single light, the light from a single candle that's lit, and as long as that's there, there's going to be people out there who are going to catch on to that. So it should always be there, to do that. So for me, if I haven't turned, I don't know, California into a free market haven, I'm not going to be that discouraged, because on the greater plane in my life, as long as I'm okay with God, I can sleep at night. I mean, so, and if this country, turns, to some measure of tyranny that I've experienced from way back when, um, then sometimes people have to learn through a trial of fire versus the light, of enlightenment in terms of knowledge. There'll always be people like you and me, and maybe not always uh, visible, out there, but under the surface, ideas are powerful, and the yearning for freedom, is an amazing thing. And ultimately, like for example, nobody knew in 1985 that the Soviet Union was going to collapse, and from that rubble, was going to be many free, sub countries, Latvia and so forth. And for me, when me and my family escaped Yugoslavia, and we watched from a distance, a few years before Yugoslavia's collapse, we didn't realize until a few years afterwards that from the rubble came multiple places that were in and of themselves more free and prosperous, like Croatia, etc. So even in the darkness of tyranny, something happens. Many times it's that invisible hand of God, and all of a sudden you get surprises that you didn't see coming, and afterwards go, oh man, I did not see that coming. I mean, and so there, hope is always going to be there, because God's always there, and and I love. I got to tell, if you don't mind, when I get your emails, I always reread it at the bottom. By when you go through the travails, it won't be good until the end, and if it's not good, it's not the end. So this is very true. The good guys, through the man upstairs, will be the ultimate winners after all of this is said and done.
That's a very optimistic note. So let's wrap up by having me ask you this question. Let's suppose that a college did let you in and you were able to talk to a full auditorium of 200 students, and the student got up and said, Paul, I get it. Um, you're an advocate for the free market. I see how it picks people up and everybody can prosper. And I'd like to become an advocate too. But Paul, I'm afraid. I understand that the struggle to step up will involve a trial by fire. I'm really reluctant to go through a trial by fire. I don't know if I have the strength to do this. What advice or encouragement could you give that student to embolden them to step up?
Well, here's the thing. Um, for people who are in there, on the front lines and taking the slings and the arrows. No, and I mean, even among many good people, good-hearted and good intentions, the majority don't have the wherewithal for a variety of reasons to be on the front lines. So all I can say for people like that is, but nothing stops you, in your own comfortable way of being a supporter of the people who are on the front lines, because, because for many folks, we have to understand is like you have the people who are out there taking the slings and arrow with this, but it's always a lot easier for them if there's support, tactical air support, so to speak. So nothing stops you from sending a donation to them, what I mean, or otherwise send them an email and say, I saw your speech last week, great, please continue, God bless your pursuits. You could always be in a supportive area for these things, and and that many times that makes the difference, because when you're out there taking a slings and arrow, it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to have a tough day and you look at your email and another nasty gram from some whatever, some pro-communist sending you a nasty gram, etc. But when they also see an email say, thanks to you, I've learned, how to do better in my life, and I've appreciated the idea of freedom, then those people end up the ones that surprise people at the voting booth, etc. So every voice, no matter how modest, can be used. So take heart. You don't have to be in the front lines. It takes a certain special quality for a lot of folks. I'm not necessarily always on the front lines, but I admire the people who do. When I see that, I'll contact them afterwards, or I'll send a donation to their organization, because that helps them get through and keep the fight going, for the benefit of all. So you could always be a supporter in some way, shape, or form, of the freedom and the good guys, so to speak, in your own comfortable way. But the point is, never do nothing. Always do something.
Amen. Paul, you're a prince among men. You're a good guy. And thank you for giving us the gift of your knowledge and your experience and your spirit. I really appreciate it.
Well, may all good folks be uplifted and onward and upward, again, with the grace of God. God bless everyone listening to this audience. And thank you. Special thanks to you, Stephen, for this wonderful event. I thank you.
Amen. You're welcome.